We're going to test you later on. Okay, returning from closed session, we'll have open session. Report out from closed session, we provided direction to staff. Would you all please stand for a pledge of allegiance? And Chrissy, would you lead us in that pledge, please?
Yes, of course. Salute. Pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible.
Thank you, Councilman.
Thank you for that honor. It's the last junior high. Yeah.
Okay, we have, next item is the adoption of agenda.
So moved.
I second.
Motion second to adopt agenda. Can we have our votes here? Oh, I'm in the wrong place.
Oh, sorry. Hold on.
Can you move that or you want to move?
Yep, that's,
Go ahead.
I
Jan.
apologize.
Okay, we're good.
Okay. Motion carries with, oh, that's okay. Well, I'll move it. 4 yeses and 3 nos, or 3 absent, sorry.
Thank you.
I'll dig.
Okay, public hearing. The public hearing will begin as follows at 6 p.m. And just a short note for, we begin the meeting earlier. We have Councilman sick and absent tonight. That's why we're sitting in different positions. So we do have a quorum though, and we'd like to begin the public hearing.
Good evening, Councilperson Pittman and Council. What you have before you this evening for this public hearing is an educational hearing to gain information and collect information regarding the redistricting process the city of Oroville will be going through. We have contracted with Q2 Data and Research. With them tonight, representing them will be Jane Hood. Jane will be giving you a presentation on communities of interest and the redistricting process. She will also be presenting a timeline toward the end of her presentation. That timeline is subject to change because there may have to be some variations to that. We're trying to work through those variations now. Once we have those nailed down and we have those worked out with Ms. Hood, we will re-advertise the public hearings and make sure that there's ample notice to everyone and that the council can be here. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over to Ms. Hood of Q2 Data and Research.
Good evening. Thank you so much. Let me share my screen and begin the presentation. Hello, my name is Jane Hood, and I'm here on behalf of Q2 Data and Research, your consultants for this project. Obviously, previously, your consultants for the districting process in 2020. So we're grateful to be working with you all again in the city of Oroville. Tonight is the second hearing for the redistricting process. And as was mentioned, tonight is really focused on public input and communities of interest. So this is the second of 2 pre-draft hearings. So the Fair Maps Act requires that we have 2 hearings before we start drawing maps. So to gain, input from the public and direction from council on how to draw these maps. So that's what tonight is about. I'll go through these slides. Some of it will be review for those of you who went through the districting process or heard the presentation for the last hearing that we had. But just in case there's newcomers, today we'll go over a little bit briefly the introduction and background to what is redistricting, then the laws governing redistricting. We'll talk about the criteria again, as well as one particular criterion, which is communities of interest. We'll go into that one a little bit more detail. And then, as mentioned, we'll talk about the process timeline and how folks can get involved if they're interested in being part of this. I'll also do a demonstration of the city's online redistricting tool that we've created. This will go live on your website very shortly, but we have a demonstration of what it's going to look like tonight for you so that people can start to draw their own maps if they're interested. So as you all know, the city of Oroville converted from at-large to by-district elections in the year of 2020, and this was prompted by the California Voting Rights Act. And so many other cities have also gone through this transition from at-large to by-district elections. And so now the city of Oroville has its 6 by-district city council districts. And council members, of course, must live in their district to represent it. And then voters will decide who represents their district. Obviously, you just went through districting. Now we're going through redistricting. So the districting was the process of creating your districts to begin with. And then redistricting is adjusting those boundaries after the release of the 2020 census. Due to COVID-19 and the pandemic, obviously the census was greatly delayed this year, so we did not receive the data until September 20th for redistricting, which is much later than it would typically come out. So everything has sort of been pushed back due to the data release, but we do have the data now available, and we have it prepared to show you tonight how things have changed since this data has been released and collected. And so redistricting, as we like to call it, it's an opportunity to bring your existing districts into compliance with all of the redistricting criteria that we'll go over tonight. So here, of course, we're going to talk briefly about the access tool that we've created. So the city will have a free online mapping application where the public can, engage online and draw maps of their own if they would like to. And so those will be considered by the council, and we'll analyze those for you so that you can, potentially use them as your draft maps or a finalist map if that's of interest. So I'll briefly switch out of this PowerPoint to show you what the online tool looks like. So here, there's multiple here. Here we go. Sorry about that. This is the online tool, redrawmyoroville.publicredistricting.com. I won't go into too much detail, but just to show you some of the features. Of course, on the Welcome tab, we'll have a user guide for anyone who wants to figure out how to use the tool, or if you have questions, that's a great place to go. You can create an account or use the tool as a guest. If you'd like to create an account, that means you can have multiple plans in there and kind of revisit them at later dates. Tonight, I'll show you as a guest. First, you would need to create a plan name. So let's call it My Plan. And you'll be taken to a map of the city, just like the one that we will be redistricting on our mapping software. Looks a little different than this, but very similar. So essentially, here are the drawing features, and you can just click around on the map to select parts that you would like to add to a district. Once you're happy with that, you can give your district a title. So let's call it, let's call it A. We'll add that to our district. Once you have, drawn districts you're happy with, you can look at the statistics window. We'll show you all the population information associated with that. If you're interested, you can also look at your current districts. So if you want to use those to draw a plan, and then you can either save or submit your plan once you're done. So that's just a brief little intro for you all to see what this tool looks like. And if there are questions, this is the help button with the user guide, as well as the, the help email address that folks can contact us at if they need further assistance. So that is the access tool. And I'll just show the slides one more time.
Jason,
so
let me interrupt you for a moment. We have some questions coming up. Shall we hold the questions to the end of your presentation, or would you like to take them during the presentation?
Could we please hold them till the end if that's okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that is, and happy to answer any questions about that at the end. But we're, when that goes live, users will be able to create plans, and then we will post them for consideration. So that is the access tool. Just to revisit the mapping criteria that we are keeping in mind, and the council should be keeping in mind as we create these plans. These are from California Elections Code, the Fair Maps Act, which is a new piece of law, came out in 2019. And so this is the first redistricting cycle, which under which this is applicable. So these are the criteria that we have, and they're ranked in order. The first two are non-negotiable. Obviously, we have to comply with the US and California Constitution. And here we're talking about making sure that the districts have equal population. The second one is to, of course, comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act and all federal law. And the Federal Voting Rights Act specifically addresses voting rights for racial and language minority groups. The third criterion is contiguity, making sure your districts are all in one piece, all in one shape. The fourth one, which is what we'll talk about the most tonight, is respecting and minimizing the division of local neighborhoods and communities of interest. And we have to note here that communities of interest can not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or other political candidates. So these are not for, political purposes, trying to, influence this process. These are for, local communities and neighborhoods to get involved. Number 5 is that the boundaries should be easily identifiable and understandable by residents. So following streets, rivers, things like that. And the last one is compactness. So trying to keep those districts together. And finally, this is a non-criterion, what we should not do, which is again, not favoring or discriminating against political parties. So those are our mapping criteria, which we will keep in mind throughout this process. The first one, as we mentioned, obviously, is having equal population. So we wanted to share the Oroville total population from the 2020 census for purposes of redistricting is here. It's 20,191. And then we will divide that to get the ideal population for each district. We'll divide that by 6. So that takes us to 3,365 people per district. And here is our assessment of your current boundaries. So we were able to take the 2020 census data and then implement that with the boundaries that you have currently adopted to see how population has changed. Obviously, you just did districting, but when you did that, you were using 2010 census data. So quite a lot has changed actually in the last 10 years since that data was released. Here we have your 6 districts, and District A is currently overpopulated by 13.22%. District B is currently underpopulated by 14.29%. District C here in yellow is 2.56% overpopulated. So that's pretty close to where we want to be at. Again, the typical range that we're looking for in deviation is plus or minus 5%. So this 2.56% would fall within that. District D is just outside of that at minus 5.08%. District E is also just outside of that at 5.47%. And then we have District F here, overpopulated by 9.09%. So, obviously this will inform how we need to move the lines to balance these populations and meet that first criterion. The main point of tonight, obviously, is to talk about this 4th criterion, which is local neighborhoods and communities of interest. So we're hoping to hear from any members of the public who may be present, either tonight or throughout this process, as well as from the council to weigh in about where local neighborhoods and communities are in Oroville. So obviously neighborhoods are specific to each jurisdiction, and they're sometimes defined by the jurisdiction, but usually it's more just a sense from the community and from the population about where neighborhoods start, where they end. So that's kind of the information that we're looking for. Specifically and related to that are this idea of communities of interest. And so generally that's a geographic area comprised of residents who share similar interests. So communities of interest are always defined by people who are familiar with their community. And it can really be a lot of different things that bring your community together. But that's up to those who live and work in the community to sort of let us know what's bringing them together, who's their community, what does it look like, etc. So I'll go into some examples just to make this a little bit more clear, sort of what falls into this, what we're looking to hear about. Sort of 2 different categories your community of interest could share: economic or social interests. So for economic, maybe there's a common employment or economic opportunities in that area. So everyone works for the same industry, for the same job. There's, a local business industry, perhaps a business district in that area. They could have the goals of expanding jobs and other opportunities, bring development, business development into their neighborhood, other things like that. Obviously, social issues could bring a community together. And here we're talking about schools. So maybe there's, a school that a lot of families live nearby, and that's their community of interest. Their kids all attend the same school. Culture is another thing that could bring a community of interest together, perhaps a shared cultural background, a cultural center, a shared language. Transportation, perhaps there's a community who wants to improve roads in their neighborhood or add bike paths, things like that. Parks are also another good example. perhaps the residents who live around a park are working to help get it cleaned up or bring in more resources or new play structure. So these are all sort of general examples of what we're looking for to hear about with communities of interest. And again, we have the opportunity for the public to weigh in on this throughout the process and weigh in online if they would like to. There are resources and handouts for them to fill out, and they could submit via email, via phone. I'll go over that at the end of this slide, at the end of these slides. But tonight, we're looking to hear hopefully a little bit about the communities of interest that the council could provide us so that we can take those into consideration as we begin to draw maps. So yes, if you would like to document your community of interest, for anyone who's here tonight or maybe looking at these slides later, we ask for two sort of questions. The first one being, what's bonding your community? So obviously tell us about what's defining your community of interest, what brings you together. Another good way to think about this could be what's different outside of your community of interest. So once you cross, this street, sort of the communities change. You could let us know that. And then most importantly, we need to know where your community is located in the city. So that could be created through a map. We have instructions for how to create an online community of interest as well, which will be provided on the website. You could also just draw them on a piece of paper or write down the boundaries. As specific as possible is really what's going to help us when we are trying to map them. So perhaps you could say, the northern boundary is this street, the southern boundary is this street, the east and west boundaries are these streets. So we can really get a sense of where that community starts and ends, and then we can keep it together as we draw these lines. And here you'll note that the community of interest testimony would best be received by December 15th, so we can consider it when we're showing all of the draft maps at the end of the month, at the end of December. Here is the timeline overview. As was mentioned, there perhaps is going to be some changes in this, and we will, appropriately let the council and the public know if that does occur. Right now, we're on hearing number 2 tonight. Again, for a public input session, if there is any public input, as well as to collect communities of interest and receive direction from the council on how to move forward with drawing draft maps. We'll have a community workshop currently scheduled for December 15th at the time to be determined. And then we'll have another hearing with council where we can do live mapping of the draft maps, and we can make modifications to those as you see fit on our mapping software. We will actually be posting the draft maps that are submitted by the public, as well as the ones that the council and the community have worked on together by December 20th. But before our next hearing and next community workshop, we will have some map options and draft map options for you to look at. So tonight we really hope to get some direction about how we can start with those, what you're looking for in those, and what communities of interest we can keep together as we do that. We'll come back in January for hearing 4, 5 to receive feedback on the draft maps and then make more adjustments as necessary. And then of course for the ordinance and the adoption of these maps. Just to touch really quickly on why it's so important to hear from the public on this process. Obviously, it's important for us to know where your community of interest is. As we're drawing these lines, if we don't know where your community of interest is, we might accidentally split it up in this process. It's also a great way to give your community a voice and make sure that it has equal access to representation on council for the next 10 years. This is a historic process, only happens every 10 years. Obviously, you just sort of did this last year, but after this year, you won't have to revisit this for 10 more years. So we like to make sure that we get as many of the public involved in this process as possible. So that is most of the slides, and then you'll see at the end we have how to get involved and how you can submit testimony. So all of that's on the website as well. But I will pause and take questions now from the council.
Councilman Pittman, prior to taking any of those questions or council comment, could you open the public hearing, please, on this?
Yeah, I'd like to open the public hearing on this topic at basically 6:20 this evening. All right, and Clerk, do we have any cards, speakers requests?
Mr. Chairperson, I do have 2 speaker cards. The first one is for Natalie Sheard.
Thank you. There you go.
I did it, okay. I want to express the reasons why I believe the historic district, as defined by our historic district overlay, meet the requirements of a voting district. We are compact and contiguous with a very strong common interest shared by all the residents. When you live in the historic district and you're outside fixing up your home or your business, neighbors from all walks of life, housed and unhoused, sober and not sober, young and old, all stop to encourage your restoration. Those that have lived there for years and those who just moved in. We all share a desire to see the historic district restored, its economy flourishing, and our residents safe. We are a unique blend of residents living in historic business and residential areas, encompassing all ages and a variety of income brackets. We have a large amount of residents that live in group homes in our historic structures. These include residents struggling with addiction in support homes, residents on probation in probation homes, and residents serving time in alternative custody homes. And we have many who live on the streets. We have an equally complex zoning mix, from R1 to high-density residential to office to commercial to mixed use to parks, all within a block of each other in certain situations. We struggle with crime. Our businesses and historic structures experience nightly break-ins with robberies and property damage. This is an example of some of the complexity that exists within our incredible mix of historic treasured buildings. Our historic district residents need a representative who lives in the historic district, a representative with blood in the game, who understands firsthand the unique opportunities and struggles that exist within our boundaries. I would say we have an intense community of interest there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well said.
Our next speaker is Julie Miller. Okay, never mind. So
Okay.
that is the last of the public speakers.
All right, do we keep the hearing open and let
Yes, sir,
council?
you can keep it open and
All
have
right.
your debate.
Councilman Riggs has a question.
Council member.
Councilmember, excuse me.
It's all right. My question was just based on the presentation when Jane switched over to the live website, that page was already different than the page printed for us as far as districting go. Can we pull that back up? And then I have a
I
follow-up.
think the presentation that Jane provided on the website was a live one where she actually was doing it in real time, so we do not have a.
Yeah, but there was already boundaries in it too.
Well, it had the city's boundaries in it. I mean, we had that in there, of course, but it didn't have, she did switch at one point to what the current districting map looks like.
Yes, and
But the one that was in, that one was in there, but the one that came up to work on, I think it did have some lines in there, but those were all.
See, that's what I'm talking about on this one.
Correct.
Even that's far different than what the pages represent.
Right. This isn't to represent that. This represents your city boundaries and you draw a map.
Okay.
You put them in wherever you like, or you adjust and grow and things like that. I think what what it's showing is it's depicting large roadways or land features for where there would be a natural break.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you so much for that question. I should have mentioned up here is the key. You'll see the red lines here. These
Okay.
are census geography. And so this is what we have to build our districts out of when we're drawing. We have to use census geography. So you can click using these larger things called tracks. If you zoom in, you can then see these black smaller pieces if you wanted to make a district using these. But basically, this is how you build the puzzle pieces of your district.
Okay, that makes sense. It just looked like the red line,
Right.
it mirrors what we already have.
Yes.
And the seeing tracks was a little too small for my young eyes. My
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, my second question is, I know that the county level is also redistricting. Do you see any benefit in, right now it looks like we'll have several district supervisors.
or at least more than one. Do you see any benefit in trying to align with that same model so that somebody would have a similar, if we're in the same neighborhood or general neighborhood, it's the same council member and district member, or should we just not worry about that level at all?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Typically, given that the processes are separate, we don't usually take that into consideration, especially because there may be different communities of interest that are active on a supervisorial level in a county versus in a city. So smaller communities of interest that might not be a part of a county redistricting process, we should take into account here. So typically we would not sort of cross over those processes. But especially because, obviously balancing population here is what's most important as the first criterion. And so but if there are, boundaries of any sort that you would like us to look at, we are happy to include those in any visualizations or maps if we are provided with a GIS layer for our mapping software.
Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to clarify that because it is oftentimes confusing to be in the same district on the city level, but a different district on the county level is something that could cause confusion down the line, but nothing we can't overcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Councilwoman Goodson? Can you go ahead?
Thank you. Yes, I was just curious, and there's a slide that makes reference to the criteria ranked in
Yes.
order of priority and specifically the communities of interest and what that entails. Could you please clarify item number 4 4A in regards to clarify, and then how do we make assurances, if that's possible, where we may not include relationships with political parties, incumbents, or political candidates?
Yes, thank you for that question. And this sounds to me more of a legal question that perhaps your city attorney could better guide you through. However, I will note that, obviously all of the communities of interest that we receive are for public record. And so the public as well as the council can review all of the testimony themselves to be sure that we're including, appropriate communities of interest in this consideration. Generally, this means, obviously, if the Democratic Party or the Republican Party of Oroville were to submit a community of interest, that would obviously be disregarded.
Okay.
But obviously, this is a process that the legal counsel and the council, city council, will be able to review all of the testimony that we receive and then, direct us which should be best kept together.
All right. So depending on what that conversation looks like and the language that comes out of it from city council and from a legal perspective, you would govern yourself accordingly.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jane, kind of a statement and then a question afterwards, but one statement that I'm going to answer because I've gotten this question numerous times today. The map that this city adopted has not been to an election yet. So if you're wondering where councilmen live or don't live, it's never been tested because we've not had an election for this current map. So the new map obviously will have, circumstances for the next election. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Jane, is what if in one of the districts that we divide up, no one runs from that district? What's our choices then?
That is an interesting scenario. Again, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't necessarily advise you on the legal options if that were to be the case. Perhaps your city attorney could provide information and insight on that. So I do not know what the outcome of that would be for the city.
Okay, I just want to kind of provide that information to the general public because there's a lot of things in this, I want to call it an animal. It's really an animal because we've got a lot of things going on with this. The other question, and I'm looking at your report, so, and you did a nice job of presenting that in the PowerPoint. So essentially, District A has seen a considerable increase in population by 13% in your figures. And obviously, we need to do some adjustment there. And then the same thing for District F, received a 9% plus. And I realize this was on the 2020 census. Currently, we have about 400 new apartments in construction. And within a year, I'm gonna guess if there's two occupants per 400, we could have 800 to 1,000 new population. Is there, in your experience with doing this, would there be an adjustment to be made, or do we have to wait for the next census 10 years from now?
Yes, thank you for that question. This comes up quite often, and the answer simply is that we would have to wait for the next census. Redistricting by law can only consider 2020 census data, and so these are the data that we have to work with. Obviously there will be changes in growth and decline throughout the city over the next 10 years, and since we don't have the data to sort of back that up yet, we can't consider it in these districts.
Thank you. Councilman Goodson?
Thank you.
I was trying to figure out how to really phrase this because the question that you asked previously is really pertinent, and people, they need to have a basic understanding of what's going to happen in the event. And we're already looking at a district that is not covered. So my question, if I can get some clarity from you, Bill, is in the event that happens and no one runs in a specific district, is there an appointment that would be made by council members?
I have an opinion, but I don't have a legal answer, so I
Absolutely.
will get
And
that
I'm
information
looking
back
for-
to you.
Yeah.
So can we get an opinion?
My opinion?
Yes.
I don't think you're ever going to have that problem. I mean, my opinion is somebody will run,
All right.
and I think that you will get somebody from each district. But I will run that hypothetical by our legal counsel and get an answer back, and I will actually post the question on the districting website with the answer from our attorney and get that to the
Great,
council.
great.
I hate to speculate more than that to mislead people, because oftentimes they'll hear the answer here and not, what the real answer is, and my opinion isn't necessarily the law.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. All right, thank you.
Any other questions from council? I will throw one in. To make the next election, which is in 2022, I'm sure that our elections officer, Ms. Scruggs, has sent us a deadline. Do we know what that deadline is?
Jane, you can correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but I believe it's April 17th. Is our deadline to get it done.
Yeah, so we have to have this all done, and then she will make adjustments because they will have to send out the right voter cards to each resident within the different districts, so they know which district they're voting in. And then the election would be who you're going to vote for in your district. So it's not an easy thing. And I only just want to dialogue that so people understand this is very complicated. It's not an easy process.
If I could, Councilman Pittman, I'd like to ask Jane one question, if that's...
Sure, please, go right ahead.
Jane, if the city were to undergo an annexation of a large area that has approximately 6,000 people in it in the next 2 years, the city could revisit the districting based upon the 2020 census numbers for the area annexed. Is that correct?
I do not want to, I'm not familiar with a scenario in which that's happened, so I can't give a definitive answer on that, but I can definitely check back and let the council and staff know about that.
Thank you, I'd appreciate that.
And again, I believe that might be a question for legal counsel. That's a little bit out of the scope of what redistricting consultants typically would know about, but I can check and see if we have an example of that to look at.
Councilman Hatley.
Yes, thank you. On these maps, in the, could we get one that actually shows in more detail the streets that are in each district? Because right now, if you look at this, I mean, it's kind of a guess of where the district actually is and what streets are encompassed within each district. Because it almost looks like Feather River Boulevard runs up to Table Mountain. Well, it doesn't. They don't go anywhere near each other. So it's like, I would just like to be able to see more detail, and I think the people the citizens of the community would like to know exactly what streets we're talking about, and that way we can make a better determination on how to regroup, because really and truly, A is 13.22% over, and some of these are under, so there's gonna have to be some kind of a fix here somewhere. And so I was just hoping for that we could get that, whether it has to be, you take District A and make a map, and then District B and C and D. If they have to be on each individual piece of paper, that's one thing, or if you can fix it some way so that you can see it on one piece all hooked together. But however, I would really like to know that, so at least you know what districts all have the streets in them.
All of these maps will be attached to the city's website, which will have greater detail than what you have here with the printed map. These are 8 by 11, so that's very difficult to do that. The interactive map that Ms. Hood demonstrated throughout the process will have multiple layers in it, so you can get down to the street grid level if that's what your desire was to do, so that you could see as you build your map. The map that exists right now, we can certainly print a larger one and have it posted to the website as well. So we will work with our GIS department to get something in there that is, for lack of a better term, expandable, so that you can get down to that street level detail like that. But as far as printing maps and handing them out, that's going to be very difficult to, who knows what somebody wants. That's, we can do each district, I suppose, with edges, so that we could provide that in a flyer type of a situation. But really, the most accurate way to do it for an individual to access this information, and probably the most reliable, would be through the electronic form on the website.
And that's all well and good if everybody in the world could use electronic devices like that.
Correct.
Or had them at their disposal. Some people don't. And so I just want to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity to get to see and have input if they wish. And because like I say, not everybody has a computer. Not everybody is computer savvy enough to do all this stuff. And so I just want it to be fair to everybody, so that nobody can come back later and say, well, I didn't have an opportunity. I want to give everybody the opportunity that wants it.
And everything will be available at our city hall. Will be available on our website as well. I mean, of course, we have the electronic issue there. So hard copies will be available. We'll have those in our lobby. Will be the district. It's one of the things that I'm beginning to struggle with in my life is things that I could see before. I can't see them now. I use flashlight for things. I used to laugh at my dad all the time about having to use a flashlight. That's not funny. I mean, that has become a real part of my life. So we will do the best we can to create something, and we would encourage anybody that needs help with that, or, needs assistance with accessing it through the computer or something like that, or a larger map, to contact us and let us know. And we'll certainly do everything we can to accommodate that request, blow up those districts that they live in or wherever they live, so that they can see where the lines are, and help them create a map. That's part of what the workshop process is going to be too. They can come down, interact with staff, interact with our consultants, so that they can build a map or contribute to a map if that's what they would like to do. So we will do everything we can to make sure that everyone has equal opportunity and access to designing these districts to meet our community's needs.
Anyone else in the public like to comment in this public hearing? I'm trying to stay procedurally correct here, because if no one else is there, I should close the public hearing. We've fairly much had council debate. Any council other concerns or questions?
If I may ask a question,
Please do.
may I ask? Oh, thank you. So tonight, obviously, we heard from one speaker about a community of interest in the historic district, and I just wanted to prompt the council if there are other communities of interest that they would like to make us aware of now. Anywhere on the map, anywhere, perhaps it's between a boundary, or you see it might be changed, boundaries near it might be changed. this would be very helpful information, as well as, next time we see you, we will have maps for you. And so it's helpful on our end to know sort of what you're looking for, what options you'd like us to explore, if there's, certain areas where you'd like to see population moved, or just explore those areas, what it could look like. Any specific direction from the council on either communities of interest or the map at large would be very helpful. I know it's still very early, and we're just starting this process, but any information from the council on those topics would be very useful. Thank you.
Councilman Hatley, are you in the queue or are you done? No. Okay. Goodson, are you in the queue? No?
No, but Bill had clarified that in regards to Hatley. I just wanted to state that the population that may be digitally challenged will have an opportunity at one of the workshops, so everyone is covered.
I think to answer your question, Ms. Hood, the map that we have accepted or adopted, I should say, it pretty much has an indication of community interest. When you look at South Side, you look at East Oroville, you look at Thermalito on the other side of the river. I would imagine we try to keep the river from being the middle of a district as it goes through the community. And I think the stronger interest is to find borders that are very well defined. Most of the borders, if you look at this map, are, and I'm coming from my side of the fire service that has this entire city memorized in my head. It's a weird, tragic data, nothing, but that's what we do. And I appreciate Councilman Hatley's comment, but in the fireman's head, each one of these streets by heart. But we really need to get to a point where the public understands the common streets and the common borders, and trying not to, create which side of the street you're on or which side of the border is, so it's very simple to everybody understand. And I think the South Oroville area in the industrial complex, there's very little occupancy, and obviously that's not really a community of interest, but it is part of the city. And then you have the airport where you've got the largest growth, and that's mostly because we've got a huge amount of new single-family homes out there, and we're going to have more on top of that. So I would say, just as a general overall observation for you, is that we already kind of have the community of interest in blocks. And Natalie mentioned downtown historic. I mean, that's a great comment, and certainly well worthy of their having representation to those specific issues for downtown. So if you could just, adjust the numbers so we all kind of maintain these, it'd be a great way to do it. And the challenge is out here to the public. Get online and play with the maps and let us know. Maybe you can create a wonderful idea that none of us thought about. So I think that's the next step in our process as we move to the next meeting, which is December 15th for this topic.
For the workshop.
For the workshop.
The 16th was the next scheduled meeting,
So,
unless we have to change that date.
Please get online. I guess the data will be available to you, as you said, tomorrow morning or sooner. And we're definitely asking for citizen participation. It's a big help to do that. And I really appreciate the comment about the historic district. That's a good point to be made. Thank you. Any other comments?
I'm just curious, for District A and B, we've got a +13 and -14. I mean, this is baffling to me. How do you plan on, qualifying those numbers to meet that percentage threshold? I mean, there's a huge disparity here.
Yes, that's the main issue that my, I as a demographer goes to on this map. So we're seeking input from the council and from the public about how to adjust these boundaries, because obviously we've heard direction that, where we can, to try and keep the boundaries that you currently have that do respect the communities of interest that are already there. But as was just pointed out, A and B have such significant population changes that we are going to have to change those boundaries fairly significantly to alter that. So if there is, perhaps areas where you could see that being best done, we welcome that direction.
Okay.
Do a bunny hop on that.
We have our work cut out for us, don't we, folks? All right. Any other comments or moving forward? Do you have, staff have direction necessary?
Yes, sir, I believe we do. Jane, do you have any additional information that you could gather from us tonight, you believe?
I think that that was very useful direction. And of course, just a reminder to the public and the council that there are ways to continue to be involved and submit input online. There are forms to fill out, emails that you could reach out to us at redistricting@cityoforoville.org. So we welcome hearing from you that way as ideas come to you. And then we will take those all into consideration and present them back to you when we see you again in December. With this initial direction, we will start to create map options for you so that we can take a stab at 3 different ways to do this. We'll post those online for comment and review, and then we can go over them and make modifications next time we see you and consider any maps that have been submitted by the public. So thank you very much, Council. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, too. Appreciate your presentation. I guess I'll move for a motion for adjournment. Do we hear that?
So moved.
The motion second to adjourn.
Second?
Have a quick vote.
Do we vote for this?
Aye.
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 We're good.
We are adjourned, folks. Thank you.
Thank you. I nominate you as mayor. Oh, my goodness. Was that close?
Well, thank you. Thank you. I will.